Welcome to Real Talks. I'm Loti, and today we're going to be speaking to Sosa Henkoma, one of our anti-knife crime speakers. Sosa's story goes from child exploitation to gang crime to now being a public speaker and a mentor for young people. Without you, our podcast won't go further. So we want to keep bringing these inspiring guests to you and keep changing lives. So please follow Real Talks podcast and make sure that you're sharing and supporting. Now let's get into this episode. Tell me, I wanted people to know a little bit about you and your story and your background. What got you to this place where you're at now?
My background is obviously child criminal exploitation. So I'm a survivor of child criminal exploitation. And the environment I grew up in was obviously quite loads of gang activities.
Yeah. And
was quite trapped in a gang culture in my childhood. And that was due to childhood trauma at a young age, from abandonment from my mum leaving at a young age.
Yeah.
And then obviously being abused by my stepmom and having that, I'll say that relationship breaking down with my parents.
Yeah.
Which led to me being vulnerable to then be exploited by gangs.
Which makes me want to ask you then, there was definitely some kind of attraction to be in a gang, to be in that. What was the attraction that got you there? And obviously it's exploitation, so somebody took advantage, but what was the initial attraction of you being in the gang?
I would definitely say, for me, it wasn't so much of an attraction. It was more of a fact of a bond and a sense of belonging, a sense of like fitting in when you feel like you're an outsider.
Yeah.
So for me, at that moment in time, I just came from Nigeria, because originally I was born in Nigeria. And then when I just came from Nigeria, it was a fact of being bullied in school and obviously being different and being treated different.
Yeah.
For me, I wanted to fit in. I wanted to obviously have friends. Who wouldn't want to have friends? And from trying to have friends, which then led to obviously having the wrong type of friends. And the wrong type of friends obviously introduced me to their older peers. And then their older peers then thought it was more of a thing of, at that moment of time, I was in care and no family connection. It's easy to, you know, to have this little boy up in whatever county line.
Of course.
That's where it was.
And what you as a young person, now if you look back at yourself, what advice would you give to that young person now, to a person that wants to get into gangs?
For me, is that no one really reads that little blueprint. So in that little blueprint, no one tells you the fact of constantly living your life in survival, because like you have enemies, and not on top of just enemies, you have obviously the police, which at the end of the day, because let's be real, even though everything I went through was, I would say, due to obviously me listening to my elders, but I still faced criminal charges. And I still had to spend time in prison. I still had to do all these things where, when I was young, no one really told me about, you know, one day you might have to go jail, or one day you might get stabbed, or one day you might get shot.
They just show you the money in the cars and...
You know what I'm saying to you?
Yeah.
Like, that is easy.
Yeah.
So when you see that bit, you're thinking, oh, you know what? This isn't that bad. And even for me, when I first got involved, no one showed me monies and cars. It was just more of a fact of friendship.
Yeah.
Like, I just love the friendship. Obviously there was money around,
Yeah.
but I never thought, oh yeah, I'm gonna be getting paid, or this is gonna be something that like it's gonna last for the next 10 or 11 years of my life.
Yeah. But you had people around you, didn't you? And that was kind of what it was. But having people around you, now you've been through being shot and stabbed. Talk to me, how did that feel? That feeling when that was happening, how was it?
A lot of trauma that I have experienced goes back to the fact of me feeling like I have no one there.
Yeah.
So like both times, I'll say when I've been shot, that was a thing where I had my people around me, and obviously gang members at that moment of time. But when I was stabbed, it was a fact of like just being there and thinking, is someone going to come?
Yeah.
Now that's all I can really and truly remember about that situation, because I was rushed to hospital and everything else. But before I was rushed to hospital, I didn't know I was being rushed to hospital. I fainted. So it was a fact of like, I remember just being there and thinking, is someone gonna come? And this was
Yeah.
the first time I was ever stabbed. But then after that, it was just like stabbed.
Adrenaline.
It happens now.
So the first time you were stabbed, and you said you couldn't remember anybody, how you were rushed to hospital. When you woke up, who was the first person there?
For me, at that moment in time, I remember, I think it was my social worker, not even my foster carer at that time.
Wow.
It was my social worker. And she didn't really spend long there either.
Yeah.
So for me, that was another problem
Yeah.
in building that relationship.
Yeah.
But also at that moment in time, I feel like also when it comes to like social care and the services at that moment in time, they didn't understand what exploitation was
Yeah.
or what modern day slavery was. So for them, it was just like, oh, this young person is just putting himself at risk.
Yeah.
So it was like they didn't know how to deal or manage that situation.
Yeah.
So on their half, I would say like, you know, obviously now they're a lot better, but back then it was just a bit different. So at that moment in time, I probably spent like an hour with my social worker, probably less than that, and she then left.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was just like, I'm here by myself.
At that point, did you feel, where's the gang? Where's everyone?
But that's another thing though. It's because at that point, when that social worker did leave, probably the next day, I had my oldest in that room.
Yeah.
Then when I say to you,
Yeah.
I had my oldest in that room coming to see me and all these type of things. And so it was like, and even then for me, it was like, that there is another sign of obviously like, why is there grown up adults coming to see a child and you don't have no relationship with this child?
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's a sign of exploitation. Like, a sign of something is definitely weird in this relationship. So then it was like, I had the oldest, and straight away with the oldest, at that moment in time, this is I'll probably say the early stage of grooming.
Yeah.
And it was like, at that moment in time, it was like, oh, we told you they're going to try to kill you. So it basically plays into the ideas that they already basically installed in me.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, when I left that hospital, I listened more to my elders because like they told me before this was going to happen.
Yeah.
No, obviously looking back at it now,
it's a false sense of security really that they were giving you by kind of telling you that it's going to happen, almost to make it look like protecting you. Now, having gone through that, what was the turning point? Because obviously you got stabbed again, but after that, what was the turning point for you to look away from gang membership?
I would definitely say my turning point was not even when I was identified as a survivor. Like, even then was not my turning point. My main turning point was when someone told me to put myself in basically take myself out of the situation and put my daughter in my situation, and asked me, if your daughters went through this, how would you feel as a parent?
Yeah.
And for me as a parent, I remember saying, oh, I'll go to jail. Like, I ain't having that.
Yeah.
And when obviously we had that conversation, that's when I was proper able to actually look at the bigger picture, because once I'm in the picture, it's hard for me to look at the whole picture. So once I was taken out of the picture, I was able to see it for what it is.
Tell me, at that point, did you ever think, this is it, I'm not going to make it, this is it?
But for me, I felt like I've lived my life at that point from very young.
Yeah.
Because from the first ever trap house I've ever been to, I had a shotgun being pointed at me.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was probably like 10.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, running and getting shot at this moment of time now I was already trapped and already hooked within that whole gang.
Yeah.
So it was like getting shot at was nothing new, because my olders were already showing me how to shoot.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, this is part of this is our life.
Yeah.
This is how we live. So for me, it was just like, you got to adapt quick to the situation.
Absolutely.
And go. So when I was shot, I didn't even know I was shot. And it was like, when I got to the house, that's when I was told that, yo, you're bleeding. And I'm like, oh, you know what I'm saying to you. And then that's when I realized I was shot. But for me, every single time when I was stabbed and shot, it was always a fact of my elders installed in me from a very young age of anything violation responds with violence.
Yeah.
So from very young, my normal response was violent. So straight away when I've been shot, I'm not being told, oh, like, you need to rest, or you need to, bro, like, that's so crazy. What a normal person will think, bro, like, that is mad. Like, how are you getting shot at? But instead, my orders would be telling me, oh, we need to get them back, we need to ride, and we need to do these type of things. So that installed in a lot of times where is that I'm not too busy worrying about getting stabbed or shot. I'm more worrying about if you shoot me, I'm coming back.
Yeah. So
That's
straight
the-
away, you had a mindset of, you know, regardless of how much pain you had at the time, there was no room for anything else.
No.
But that brings me on to trauma then, because from the age of 10 or around that age up until being a teenager, you know, what part has trauma played in your recovery now and the effects of your mental health?
I would definitely say trauma is a big thing for me in general, like my whole life in general. Because obviously from young, like I had trauma from then, like the abandonment of my mum, and then later on with my father and my stepmom. Then being involved, it was like at that moment of time, I was constantly in that in that in that position where it's like I'm adding on to everything else. But then also is that imagine growing up, like I always felt like I didn't belong or I didn't fit in. But then these people, they make me feel belong and they fit in. Even though sometimes I feel like what they do isn't right, it's like they make me feel all right. So for me at that moment in time, I was not able to see the whole facts of, oh, I'm bringing back this person nearly 2 grand a day, and I'm probably only seeing £100 out of that 2 grand, and I'm not thinking like that. I'm thinking in my head that this is all for the team, this is all for everything else. But if now looking back at everything else, is that if you deep it, like, my oldest stayed in their house, done happy life with their family,
That's
went
a
on
good point.
holidays.
That's a good point you made as well, because for the young people that will be watching this, what advice have you got for them, especially those who are thinking about making fast money?
Mhm.
You know, what's the advice for them to stay away from that?
I would definitely say, but the fast money thing is that you're not making as much profit as you think you're making, because at the end of the day, the olders, like in my situation and looking back at that, was that my olders, they just sat home and on holidays and had fun. Like me, I constantly risk my life just to see some sort of fun for the end of the day. And that was all for literally for someone else's cause, never my own cause. And with all of this banging and gangs and everything else, I realized I was fighting for other people's cause, never my own. And I got trapped in other people's cause, because really and truly, like when I first got involved in this, like I'll be real with you, people wanted to kill me, but bro, let's say move me to a different area and all these type of things, that probably would have fixed it. But then, like to the extent that it then went into, it was like extreme, like, and that for me is that a lot of young people don't see that extreme side. Like I've seen, like for me, I've had friends die, and is that you have to watch that. Like people think that, oh, you're gonna be in a situation where, oh, RIP my friend.
And talk to me about that specific thing you just said, watching people die. What does that feel? What does that look like?
You have two feelings in that situation, and for me, obviously, maybe other people have different feelings because other people feel things different. But for me, I had two feelings in that situation for me, and that was pain, but also rage. So even though I was upset, my friend has been stabbed and everything else, but it's the fact of I now have rage because that's all I know. All I know is I need to respond to this. Like my friend just can't just die now and that's it. And a lot of times, like I said, your elders feel the whole thing. So it's always like, oh, can't let my man die. Like, and it's always mind games, and the manipulation is so subtle where to you it seems right what is being said to you. So for me, when I'm being told, oh yeah, you can't let your friend die because bro, like fam, your friend just died for the team and that you need to get back, you need to do this, you need to do that. In my head, it makes sense because bro, like my friend just died and I need to get back for my friend.
Of course.
But in reality, that's not how you deal with things.
No, absolutely not. You mentioned manipulation as well, which is really important. What are signs for people to look out for in a young person who is perhaps being manipulated by a gang?
I would definitely say change of behavior. So for me, growing up, I was dance. I love to dance in front of like my school and that in primary school. Like I may be a little bit weird with my little creativeness and all of that type of things.
Nah, I'm the same. We're
Really
the
and
best.
truly, you know what I'm saying to you?
Yeah.
So really and truly, I was a loving kid. Like I was calm, but then even you see the reports how it changes of like he doesn't engage with this, like it's quite closed, all these type of things that. And even for me, it was that a lot of times people always say look out for the new tracksuits and the new shoes, but everyone knows that now. So most of the time, that is that lots of young people already thought about that, and the elders already gave them a little story with that too. Like, say your friend bought that, say you got that from your friend's house. Like,
you can hide those facts.
So all them facts have been thought about and hidden. You need to start thinking of behavior and change of how they respond. So it's like once a young person is involved here, they feel like that person is that gang is their family. So for them, it's like, you lot don't. They see, one thing that always played with a lot of parents that I've actually engaged with was that you lot don't understand me. And a lot of times when you hear that statement, they understand me, you lot don't understand me. Like, that's why I chill with my friends. Like, that is signs of exploitation. Because how does your friend understand you more than your parents that gave birth to you? That watched you from primary school to secondary school or to whatever stage you're at at this point of life. Like, that is a sign of manipulation. That the fact that you feel like you can have friendship groups, which is accepted in the household, but if you feel like you can't bring your friends to the house because your mum might think that, I'm saying to you,
there's something quite
a bit fishy about that one.
Yeah, of course, 100%.
So
and for those who don't feel like they're understood, what outlets are they out there? Because I know you've gone through a lot of that, and what support can you provide, and what's the reasoning of you going into schools as well?
For me, I would definitely say is given that I'll say 100% that relatable experience is because at the end of the day, I remember growing up and seeing a lot of people, a couple of people, even when I was in prison, like a lot of people in prison, school, everything come in and try to tell me something different. And for me, every single time when I met these people, I always thought to myself, bro, you don't know half of it when it comes to banging, bro. Like, literally. And most of the time, I was in that room actively banging myself. So actually being in them rooms and like, for me, is able to give young people a real insight on how it is to actually live that life, because a lot of time is glorified and or glamorized and all these type of things by different rappers and different peoples and everything else. But it's to actually show young people that there is more, and even if they are going through similar situation as me, that there is another way out of it. And then that's exactly what I tried to do. Give them hope.
Yeah, and that's really important, because the teenage these days, there is no hope. There's lack of jobs. There's no support. But what can teachers and schools do a bit more of, as well as obviously having you in schools and providing that support and inspiring? What else can teachers and schools do?
I would say equip young people with emotional intelligence. I've 100% believe that is the key, very much key to understanding, because if you understand emotional intelligence, you're able to understand your environment, able to put that in a different position where you sit down and think, okay, like, this is how my environment makes me feel. So that means I need to get out of this environment. How can I get out of this environment? I need to work harder. Like, all these type of things, which I feel like should be taught to kids from primary school.
For those young people, what if they lose whatever they were supposed to be selling?
For them, it's simple, like, and what a lot of young people don't understand in this type of in how I call it the game, is that the game is to make more money, and the same way that young person wants to make more money is the same way the older on top of him wants to make more money. So in any ways that they can make more money, they will make more money. So let's say if the house gets raided and a young person gets arrested with the drugs, he owes the older money, because technically that was in his possession. The older gave him and trusted him with his possession. Then after, let's say if now your house get let's say get run up on, and when I say run up on, that means how can I explain run up on?
So when some, like, say, an opposition or someone from a rival gang will
so someone from a rival gang obviously kicks in the door and takes the drugs off you, then you still owe the older money. And let's say on top of that you can be facing criminal charges, and even on top of the criminal charges, by the other gangs coming in, you can be facing nearly losing your life. So really and truly, is that you're putting way more risk like for the work that you do, but then you can have a secure job, which probably gets you. Let's be real, fam. Obviously, I don't really believe in the matrix, but let's be real. Gets you a pension, gets you income every single month, and that's 100% of income you therefore gonna get every single month. Maybe a little tax, maybe the tax man takes his little bread.
Yeah, he's got to do his bit.
He takes his little bread, whatever. But either way, you're getting a good sum a month. So therefore, at the end of the day, what I try to encourage young people is, if you have a business mentality, start using that business mentality and start thinking about products that you can use instead of drugs or trapping, because really and truly, you're given that older your business mentality. So if you're able to use that business mentality, work together as a unit, build a business, by the time you're 18 or by the time you're 21 or by the time you're 25, you can have a sustainable business at a young age. But a lot of young people don't think about that because it's not encouraged in the environment we're from. And that's something I would like a lot of young people to understand, that every young person which wants to get involved with selling drugs or get involved with gangs or anything like that, really and truly, that mentality that you have can be used elsewhere. You just have to find the right place it fits in, because being involved in that is you're going to be exploited for all your talents and you're going to get nothing back at the end of it. Because even me, at the age of 22 coming out of prison, it was like I felt like I had nothing. Like I felt like I had nothing, and on top of that, what made it worse is I have more of a burden now too. Not obviously their burden, but I had my kids and I had everything else that's going on. So for me, so for me is that, like, maybe when I was coming out of jail when I was younger, it wasn't so much of an issue. But coming out of jail now is like, what is next? Absolutely. Like, what happens next? And obviously being stuck in a position not able to do nothing, that's what obviously probably brought me down a bit. But for me, it was what was next. So, and it was trying to use my skills for other things. On a more of a business level, and kind of learning, and so don't be a trapper, be an entrepreneur. That's it. And I think it's key. What are you doing? Because you're currently at university as well as trying to inspire young people. What is it you're studying? I'm currently studying law, criminology and sociology. I was gonna say I'll talk about the first bit. You got into you thought it was sociology. I thought it was more criminology and sociology. Found out the law bit and induction bit, so it was kind of. But for me, the course is very, very interesting, because obviously with my lived experience and also able to bring that into a classroom and able to discuss that with other people with different backgrounds. For me, that also helps me in engaging and literally improving and growth within myself. So makes sense. Definitely. Talking back about the fact that you changed your life and now you're studying and trying to inspire young people, which you are doing. What was the turning point for you to step away from gang life and the violence that was there? The craziest thing about it is when I was released from prison, I was actually arrested in 2021. And when I was arrested in 2021, I was arrested for 8 different charges. And when I was arrested for 8 different charges, at that moment in time, I remember asking the police officer, because they arrested me in the immigration when I went to go sign on. So I remember sitting down with the police officer and saying, "Rah, am I going home to my kids?" And the police officer basically saying to me, like, "It's up to you, like, how this turns out." And for me, I've gone into the police station, and for me, for the first time in my life, like, I sat there and actually sat there and thought, "Rah, like, these people they didn't really and truly have nothing." It was just more of a fact of I came out of prison and they may have seen I was some sketchy people, and they wanted to just make sure whatever they were doing had nothing to do with me. But after literally explaining to them why I was in that place, what I was doing in that place and everything else, it was a fact of they gave me a travel warrant and then they took me to the station. But for me, it basically also gave me that 2-side perspective where I was able to understand that, okay, so I can speak to these people and they're calm. But if a lot more young people like me can speak to these people, then really and truly that issue wouldn't be there. But then if now I can do that for just not police, but for social workers and probations and prison officers, then I can change the way professionals perceive young people and how young people perceive professionals. So for me, that was my main thing. So even with going into schools, it's changing that perspective of like sometimes speak to your teacher. Like obviously, I know not all teachers you can speak to, but there are some cool teachers that you can proper rap to and proper engage with. Like rap to that teacher, like actually build that relationship. Like that's very, very important. It's good to understand the power of having a relationship.
Yeah.